Hey, how are you today? This is Josh Patrick, and you're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. And today, my guest is Chris Petersen. He's the president and CEO of On Brand Management and Media. And today, we're going to do have a little bit of a conversation around branding. So let's bring Chris on, and we'll start the conversation. Hey, Chris, how are you today?
I am great, Josh, and hello, everybody, and I hope everyone's doing well.
Cool. So, first of all, what is branding? I mean, you hear the term a lot, and I'm not sure people actually know what it is.
I always try to explain it that, contrary to what people believe, it's not a logo and it's not a bunch of ads and so forth, although those are tools to communicate the brand. Your brand is actually what you stand for. So if you've got a company, let's say that you're in the plumbing business, for example, people want to know, are you dependable? Do you know your business? What's your track record? Your integrity and those types of things are all go into establishing a brand. So to put it into a summary format, the brand is what you promise the market. And then when you go out and you do things or you sell things or whatever, you're delivering on that brand promise. And when you marriage those two things together, you've got a successful brand.
Cool. So, what's the biggest challenge of putting a brand together?
Well, first of all, I think understanding what brand is an important one. So you asked the right question first. That's the first thing we always ask. And as an example, one of the things we do on consulting engagements when we work with a company, I'll walk in and I'll get the senior managers all in our conference room. First question I ask is, "What business are you in?" And they look at you like you've grown third eye or something, because it's like, well, you know what we do. You know, for example, in the media business, well, we're in television. Okay, what business are you in? Well, we are in the news business and we present news and so on. And the engineering department will say, we're in the broadcasting business. We have these big towers and they send out signals and we're digital and so on. And everybody has their own little thing. The sales guys will always say, we're in the business of selling things. In the end, they're all wrong. They're all in the audience business. They're about drawing an audience, communicating and interacting with the audience, and then also monetizing that audience. But it's all around audience. So they're in the audience business. And I would submit that everybody watching and listening to this right now, and other people, pretty much everyone, is in the same business. It's all about attracting people to what you're selling or what you're operating in and convincing them that you're making a good promise and that you've got the integrity to deliver it. So I always kind of boil it down to there and then start rebuilding around that and getting people to think a little bit differently.
Yeah, we often like to ask people, "What's the problem you're solving?" Not often. I always ask that
Sure.
question, and I don't think more than 5% of businesses ever have an answer that's correct out of the box. And it's not
Yep.
correct. I mean, if you ask a broadcast business, what's the problem you're solving? You might get a different answer from five different broadcasters, and all five could be perfectly fine for them. But what hear most people tell me isn't what the problem they solve, which is what the brand should be talking at. I think it's the stuff they do. And in my experience, the stuff you do, your customers don't really care. They care about the result they get. Does
That's a
that make
very good
sense?
point. And along that lines and tying it back into brand, there's a famous story about when one-to-one marketing first came on the scene, and a lot of people don't understand what that is. It's very simple. It's basically, if you go back into the 1700s, people would walk over to their neighbors and have a conversation, and they would market, right? Hey, I've got this to sell you. Okay, I need that. Great. And there you go. And then, of course, as we got into the 1900s and especially into the 50s and 60s, we got into this mass media branding thing, right? You bought a Chevy, you bought a Ferrari, then right away, what did your conclusion? Chevy guy doesn't have as much money as the Ferrari guy does, right? So you start doing all these things, and it just gets parsed. So we all grew up in that environment, right? And that's the way we think about things. In branding, right? When you start thinking about your problems and so on and so forth, I think people get lost. And so, for example, GM used to make all of their business decisions. They get around a table, usually about 40 white guys, and they would say, "Here's what we're going to build because gee whiz, look what we can do," right? And so they would build a car, and then they would put $1 billion a year into advertising to go out and try to force people to want that product. That's the way it worked for 20, 30, 40 years. When one-to-one marketing became available widely, and that's because of the internet, digital, all of a sudden that flipped, and the power flipped from the company to the marketplace, right? The individual consumer. And so now the way decisions are made is that GM goes out and they do all this massive amount of research and they look at what everybody's preferences are, and then they say, okay, this is what we need to build, right? And that's why, in this day and age, within the last couple of years, decisions have been made to no longer build as many cars, and everything is going to crossovers, SUVs, and trucks. And that's why you're seeing what you're seeing.
So does that come from market research or does it come from what the customers are actually buying?
Both. Sales tracking is really a form of market research and it informs what we do in branding. Now, when you think about the branding process, and I know a lot of your audience, may not be familiar with the whole branding process, but in a nutshell, it's pretty simple. You do some research, in the individual market around the business. That research includes examining your sales, your profit and loss statement. We look at everything. We dig deep into that. We look at your cash flow and how your cash flow runs, right? And how the business gets funded. And you take all of that information and you develop patterns and we look for insights, actionable insights. And from there, we start building the brand back together and we put it through a process. So it goes from research, and then you go into analysis, then you get into everybody, all of the decision makers back in the room, present all that data, and you start having conversations about where do we need to take this? What are the opportunities that we found in the research for the future? And then you go from there.
So that sounds to me like it's a pretty complicated process where you need a sophisticated company to do it well. What happens if I'm, Joe Blow construction? I've got two crews out there working. I don't actually swing a hammer anymore, but I'm involved in bidding and, I'm really the only sales guy the company has. And I have no time, I mean, zero time to do any of that sort of market research. I'm too busy doing stuff. What do you say to that person?
We get approached by businesses like that a lot. We're based, I'm based here in Florida. I have guys in LA and Chicago. So, needless to say, we cover the whole country, but we operate in a lot of big markets. However, in Florida, there are an awful lot of exactly the type of businesses you just described. And so I've been approached quite a bit over the years to help out, and we do that. We take on those clients. And the way we work with them is we kind of cut down the process and simplify it, right? So I get engaged, I go in, I meet with the business owner. It's usually just me and them.
Right.
There's not a lot of staff, to sit around the table and
There's no
talk about it.
staff.
Yeah, exactly. They're out working, hopefully, right?
Right.
So
Hopefully they're banging nails.
exactly right, and billing hours. So we work with them. We cut down the process. I do or we do the entire research process for them. We don't rely on them. I work with their accounting firm or whoever it is that's doing their bookkeeping. And we do basically a top level research. We don't do a deep dive, and from that we can usually infer with our knowledge of that industry because we have actually worked in the construction industry a fair amount and related subs and things like that. Um, we just take that and overlay it, and we develop a general direction for them. We review it with them, make sure they're comfortable, and then usually, and this is the key part, having a bunch of plans is great. Everybody talks about these big consulting firms or even stuff like us where, you go out and we give you these big thick plans, all color graphs and everything. We can do that. We don't like to do that, but we can do that. But the real question is, how do you implement what we give you? And most consulting firms will give you that and then walk away and you never hear from them again. And then you're left
Yeah.
there with this big fat thing and what am I supposed to do with this? We actually, as part of our engagement, we climb in, roll up sleeves, and work with the business hands on if they want it. And we help them implement that. And that's particularly important to smaller businesses that don't have the staff to sit there and try to worry about that. They're just trying to keep the lights on, keep the work going, that sort of thing. So we come in and we help them execute that. And we work on a variety of levels. Some people actually hire us as de facto, presidents or chief operating officers, and working right under the owner. Others, like I said, arm's length, would still want us involved. We're happy to work and be flexible that way. And I think whether you work with us or someone else, that's the key. If you're watching this right now and you think I need this and you don't want to work with us for whatever reason, perfectly fine, understood. Whoever you work with, make sure they will come in and help you implement what they tell you to do.
Yeah, I remember there was an ad back, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago about this group sitting around a table, and there's these consultants there, and they say, okay, we want to do this. And the consultant said, what do you mean do this? We don't, we just tell you what the plans are. You got to do it yourself or something like that.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
the point was, if you don't have implementation, you don't have anything worthwhile. So let me ask you something else. When you talk about, I mean, what you've been talking about a lot is what I would consider marketing, which is creating awareness. And the other side of that is sales, which is how you actually create customers. And my experience with most small businesses, and especially construction companies, for example, they have the worst sales process of all times. They don't even bother to follow up. They send out bids and they just hope somebody answers them. Do you guys get involved in helping them create a sales process? And if so, what do you think is a good sales process for these type of folks to do?
We absolutely get involved. It's a key part because, going back to my actionable insights, right? The insights part are the plans. The actionable part is translating the plans into revenue, theoretically. So we think that's very, very important. And when people, entrust us to come in and help them with that, it's a process that we enjoy. And we have an awful lot of experience with it across a lot of different businesses. There is no one good sales process. But if you think about it in terms of marketing, is communicating your brand promise to the market, and then operations or fulfillment is delivering that, it becomes a story, right? So the sales process is the process of telling your story between marketing and fulfillment. So we like to advocate, don't be impersonal. Don't send out 1 million emails because people don't read them. They just don't. The open rate on that is like less than 0.1%. It's just ridiculous on a cold email. Um, but if you can network, if you can, plug into various areas, of course, everybody in the construction business knows about bid books and things like that that they can go reference. Those are leads. The question becomes, what's your story once you get a lead? And that's what these proposals are. Proposals are not answering this particular bid request and just spelling out what your numbers are going to be. That's obviously an important piece. That should be the last piece. The first piece should be your story about your company and why you're the best one for the job. And if you can tell that, then you're going to have much more success because you're going to cut through a lot of the clutter. The trick is to do it in the first 10, 15 seconds of somebody reading your proposal, right?
Yeah.
The average attention span right now in this age of digital, where everybody's doing what we're doing, right, is about 7 seconds. In 7 seconds, people make up their mind whether they're interested and whether they're going to continue to watch or listen or read the rest of what's being presented to them. Keep that in mind when you're making out a bid proposal, because if you're just numbers, first thing I do as a CEO, I go right to the bottom and see what the bottom line number is next, right?
Right.
Or, oh, okay,
Right.
it's all
Right.
numbers. When you're selling on numbers, you have no real brand equity because somebody can always come out and undercut you. You can't sell on price and be successful long term. You've got to have some value to offer people. It could be your integrity, could be your expertise and skill sets, it could be the flexibility of your crew, the fact that you have a huge crew and can respond very quickly to a project. There's a lot of different ways. You've got to identify that. You've got to promote that.
Yeah, it's like the problem was again, what's the problem that you're solving? One of the things I think which is construction companies don't take advantage of is we've all had experience with contractors where they leave the place a mess every night. And if you just and if you just say in your marketing or your sales material, we leave your home cleaner than we found it after we're done every day, that alone differentiates you from all the other guys out there. They may do the same thing, they just don't say it.
It's interesting you say that. I just had storm gutters put on the house, and like literally within the last 2 weeks, and they did a good job. They were very good. The problem was they came 2 days late, which no big deal. It hasn't been raining here, so it wasn't an issue. But they came 2 days late. That was a little something that I put in the back of my mind. And then when they left, I looked around and like, oh wow, the work looks really good. Then I looked on the ground, and there were screws, there was material, there was all kinds of different things that were left uncleaned. And so my takeaway was, I wouldn't recommend these guys.
Right.
I can't do that. Their work was great. They did what they said they were going to do in terms of work. They didn't go the extra mile, the obvious mile, and so therefore their brand doesn't get a high mark.
So you know, what it really tells me is that, and this is really important for small businesses in the construction world, is that one of the most important marketing things you can do, at least in my experience, is pay attention to your Google reviews and go out and get them. Because Google will rank you on whatever it is that you do if you have a lot of good reviews, and it's free advertising. Because the truth is, if you need a new roof on your house, where's the first place you usually go today?
You're going to go look for reviews. Absolutely right.
You're gonna go to Google and you're gonna look up roofers in your area, and you're
Yep.
probably going to be paying attention to reviews. And if one company has 100 5-star reviews and another company has 3 5-star reviews, you might wonder what's wrong with the company with 3 stars or
There's
three.
nothing wrong with it. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with asking for those reviews when you do a job for someone.
Right.
Just send them a nice little thank you. Hey, thanks a lot for the opportunity to work on your home or work on your job site, whatever. And then just say, would you mind leaving us a review and how we did? Tell us how we did. Don't tell them you want 5 stars. Don't tell them any of that stuff. Don't prompt it. Just ask for it. Because if
Just
you did
ask
a
for a
good job,
review.
you're going to get it.
Another really easy thing to do is whip out your phone, because we all have these incredible video cameras in our pocket, and just interview them and send it off to a some sort of videographer. I mean, I have a videographer that works for me that costs me $8 an hour,
Hmm.
and in one for $8, I can get a really nice review edited and put up on my website and use as a methodology for people to look at it, because we know that video gets way more um, attention than just text.
No, that's absolutely correct. And you talked about website. So to me, website has replaced the old collateral. In the old days, everybody had a four-color brochure,
Right.
trifold, or whatever. You don't see that anymore, or if you do, it's very rare. The website has replaced that. So my advice to everyone is a good, solid website shouldn't cost a business more than $2,000 or $3,000 at the very top end.
Yep.
But $500 won't cut it because they're just slamming you into some sort of a template with no thought about your particular business. You need someone that's going to come in, really learn about your business, understand your brand. We produce something in our branding process. It's just called a brand guide, if you will, and it includes a model for the future. And it's one page. It's almost like an org chart, if you will, and it covers various areas and it talks about summarizes what the brand stands for, how you want to communicate, all of those major things. Hand that to the web designer, whoever you're going to choose. Let them read that and tell them that's what I want on my website. Communicate that, and you'll be amazed at how good, effective a good website can be designed that way.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. We're almost out of time. I have one quick question I want to say. What's the most important financial metric all leaders must pay attention to?
Yeah, I get this one a lot too. And it always, people are like, huh? There are basically three things. And when I was running a business, for other people or for corporate, I looked at three things on a regular basis: the P&L, the balance sheet, and the cash flow. Okay. And in my world, I looked at the P&L once a month because that's historical. That's a snapshot of what you just got done doing. The balance sheet I looked at every week because that tells you exactly where you are in terms of what you owe, what you have on assets, and so on. And then I look at the cash flow. The cash flow to me is blood for an organization. You can't survive unless you can pay your bills. And people do not understand cash flow. I see this all the time. Frankly, I see it in big businesses as much as I see it in small businesses. Here's what the cash flows thing we should look at. You should have a cash flow statement that says, okay, this is my current cash position, and this is where we are, and, this is what's coming in and why it's going out, and so on. But I always insist, I demand, as the business owner or the CEO, I want a 30, 60, 90-day cash flow projection. Give me your best guess based on everything you know. Obviously, the 90-day isn't going to be as accurate as the 30-day. But you still want to look at that. Why? Because that's a prediction of where you're going to be in the future, what you're going to need in the future. Do I need to go out and secure some debt financing in order to bridge a gap, and so on? And the number one issue that people miss in cash flow management is time. They don't understand that function of time. This is going to be particularly important to construction industry issues, subs, and so forth, because a lot of times they're putting work out before they're getting paid. And so if you've got a weekly or a semi-monthly payroll to hit and your job is taking 30 or 45 days, you're not going to get paid until the back end of that job. You might get a progress payment or something up front, but it's not going to be everything that you need in order to operate your business. So how are you going to fund that gap? That's where a lot of people get into trouble. And without that cash flow projection, they get surprised. And surprise creates panic, and panic creates bad decisions.
Yeah, that happened to me when I was a new business. Is that we grew from $75,000 and 1.9 million in sales in 4 years, and
Uh-huh.
I never knew that principal payments didn't show up as an expense on your profit and loss statement. The ch-
we
the
all we all went through
challenge,
that process.
yeah, well, that almost put me out of business. The
Yeah.
challenge that comes up with that is that cash flow statements are so complicated and difficult to understand that business owners, A, they don't know it exists because their financial people, CPAs, never bother to teach them about it. That's one of my big complaints about CPAs. And the other thing is there's other issues I would like to see. I ask people to put together dashboards. And in those dashboards, I want to know what's my sales efficiency, how many sales calls are we making, what's the amount of sales we have, how much of those sales are budget proposals versus actual proposals for work that's coming. And I want to know what my backlog is. In other words, how much business do I have on the books over the next 90 days? So I can say, this is what I'm going to have coming in. And you're absolutely right about cash flow projection. But I just like to keep it really, really, really simple, meaning that if I know what my backlog is, and I have a system, and the system I recommend, by the way, for construction companies, is collect 70% of your fees before your job is done. That way, the only thing you're waiting for is your profit, not your expenses. And
Right.
if you do that, you're likely not to have cash flow issues. Chris, unfortunately, we are out of time. And this has been a really interesting conversation. I'm going to bet people are going to want to find you. So, how would they go about doing that?
Well,
And what would you
keeping
like
on
them to
these
do afterwards?
keeping on the simple idea, it's very simple. Our website is most easily reached at onbrandmedia.com. ONBRAND media.com.
Cool. And I assume you're happy to have a conversation with folks. And
Absolutely. We talk
and
to
there's a
we
way
we
and there's
talk
a
to
way for them to
everybody.
reach out to you.
I'm sorry.
And there's a way for them to reach out to you.
Oh yeah, the website will show you exactly how to reach me. Absolutely.
Okay, cool, cool. I have something I'd like you to do. This is episode, I think, 421. So I've
Mhm.
asked this for 421 times. Please go to wherever you're listening to this podcast and give us an honest rating and review. If you love us, you can give us 5 stars. If you hate us, you can give us 1 star. And if you hate us, I will cry a little bit. I will warn you that right now. But whatever you think about this show, please give us a review. It helps people find us. And the folks who listen to this show often tell me they really enjoy it. So this is Josh Patrick. We're with Chris Petersen. You're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here really soon.